Bam, this is Kev from Wonderland. This is our seed series. We're back again. The first event we did last week was just supernatural, so we're so happy that everybody was able to get what we wanted out of it, and you're back. We want to thank Shango Las from Shaping Fire as our sponsor for the event. We just released a beautiful podcast through Shaping Fire on the history of CBD, the oral history of CBD, so that people can understand basically how the genes move through the United States. We're really happy we're able to do this event. It was important for us to be able to get the breeders to access the farmers directly through this, and for all the people online to be able to see these guys direct. Everybody at the event is people that I'm really proud to know as a farmer, as a cultivator, as a cannabis professional, and a cannabis culturalist. These are all real people. And Dan from Rebel Grown is definitely one of those guys, and he and I have a pretty long friendship, and we met years ago when he was really just trying to, tackle what is this thing to him. And I was just so impressed with his enthusiasm, and he had a high level of professionalism and an exceptional palate. And I was just like, man, this kid is so sharp. And I watched him over the years really develop into a very high quality seed breeder who worked on developing lines that let people really do well if you run his stock commercially. And so it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Ken.
And Dan from Rebel Grown, and hey.
All right. Yeah, I really appreciate those kind words, Kev. I met Kev in 2010. I came into Humboldt Patient Resource Center and introduced myself and mentioned that I've been working on some breeding projects in southern Humboldt, and would he be interested? And he said, come back and talk to me in the fall. And I showed up and I brought a bunch of baggies of some of the flowers that had been grown from the seeds that I had bred, pretty much the first test run from my previous year's breeding projects. And, he said, what, I've been contacted by so many breeders overseas, everyone that's, getting into the seed industry, DJ Short, the Mr. Nice Guys, he goes, you're the first guy that's actually brought me the flowers they grow. I'll give it a shot. And now here we are 5-6 years later, and a lot of really incredible farmers in the southern Humboldt and Humboldt community have been, honoring me by growing my genetics. And then it's just an evolution of, from a passion project making seeds to see what I can create, how I can improve and create memorable cannabis. Now we have to really amp up our production and apply more scientific methods to try to really be at that top level of finding something that's world class. And then in terms of breeding, an analogy I like to make is like Biggie Smalls as a rapper. He was a hip hop fan. He was making music that he would want to hear. He wasn't making joints for the radio. And that's kind of how we are with our genetics is when I see cannabis, it doesn't matter whose it is or where it is, I want to look at it. I want to see what it looks and smells like. Mm-hmm. And I'm a fan of it. So I'm breeding and trying to create special cannabis that I would want to enjoy, that I know that I would like. And then being able to share it with patients is really one of the most enriching things in life that drives me.
Yeah, well, you're one of the few breeders that really releases cuts that you've selected. So you do a beautiful selection process, and then you release those cultivars into the public, so the public can access your OG Chems. You did some solid releases on the double OG sours. Some of the golden grams are going now. You're seeing the blueberry muffins popping out. But a lot of these are phenos that you're releasing yourself, and it allowed, to me, on my end as a genetic provider, it allowed people to really know you as a guy, because they got to work your stock just without having to sift the seed. And they said, damn, the clone is so choice, let me go into the seed and see. And you ended up having a really neat thing occur where you're seeing people run whole lines of your stuff out in their own little world. The double OG sours and the OG Chems are just flowing through Humboldt. It's being produced by tonnage.
It's awesome. And so the thing is, man, I really like cannabis a lot. I really like to spread cannabis. It's supposed to be shared, so it's like, here's a story. I had a friend of mine that was a really good hydroponics grower, and I looked at his herb. She's back 2004. And I asked, what are you using? What are you using for nutrients? Like, oh, I can't tell you that. I've developed this for years so I can hit my yields. I'm like, why wouldn't you want to share with me? Anytime anybody asks me anything about how I grow cannabis or what I've done for breeding, I would never consider not wanting to share that information. I would want everyone to have that information so maybe they could use it to their benefit. With genetics, it's the same way. A business advisor might tell you, You find that best clone that you know is going to win a cup or has won an award. You know, you hold that one and you keep that so you don't give that out to the masses. And I'm like, why? Why wouldn't I want everybody to have the best thing that I have? What, you know, there's always more to find. We can do the next generation selections and maybe we can improve it. So yeah, my vision is that if I find something good, I want other people to have the same experience that I have and enjoy it. And you know, it's been amazing to, you know, to see the results and you passing out the OG Chem cut. And you know, I was just in Sacramento the other day at a dispensary and saw the flower of it, you know, and you know, that was a plant in my greenhouse the first year that I was out here as a worker selected. So it's
it's so popular. It's really, I tell people it's its own specific market. That cut is it's one of the true cuts that pulls 30.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you open sourced it was kind of solid, you know. So I always give you props for that because really people should. They don't understand it. The bottom line is what we're doing as a group is we have to collaboratively work because none of us single-handedly can really capture the entire essence of any of the things we're doing. It's too complex. And when we work together, we all get to see the edges of a thing. And it allows us to see a bigger thing together. And if we cool about it, there's enough for all of us to work. And so it's been fascinating to have guys like Dan share, do his work. Some of the stock that he's worked on, I really love the Double OG Sour lines because it's one of the few fuel lines. There's only a couple guys that are doing it where they're doing real outdoor fuel lines that are resistant and have a quality that's superlative. The numbers are hot, which is important for the market, but the quality of the terps and the quality of the flower construction, the bud morphology, the presentation of the bud in the bag, the concept of what it is the product should be and the effect, and then the vigor and size is just unreal. What are you going this year direction? What's exciting you? Because you got a whole new line. In fact, I even got a box, man. You got a box somewhere around here.
Yeah,
I use the whole joint.
Yeah,
the new Rebel Grown box, man. It's tight.
So
it's even got the Rebel as fuck.
Basically, our breeding projects, you know, it started as, you know, pollinating one branch, you know, on a plant with one male, and just trying to make a lot of hybrids and test from those hybrids which combinations really worked and did I want to continue to work with, and what direction did I want to take them in versus which ones maybe didn't work, and okay, whoops, you know, I'm not going to do that again. At this point, you know, 6-7 years later, we now have a pretty badass, you know, year-round breeding facility, which we are just putting the finishing touches on, which will be permanent. It's basically an individual breeding chamber for every single strain. So for every single strain, we can basically pop a larger plant population. We're trying to emulate orchid breeding. Mm-hmm. So in orchid breeding, you'd pop 2,000, or you'd grow 2,000 plants, and you're looking for the upper echelon 5 plants, or 5% of the plants. So, you know, you have 2,000 plants, and basically instead of taking that one male and pollinating your best female, if you make a good decision doing that, then you're gonna have some great genetics, but you've also taken away a lot of the diversity that might be in there.
You've necked it out.
So what, you know, in orchid breeding or something like that, you'd want the upper echelon 5% of the top into the top of the top 5%, and then you're basically preserving the best of what's there and the diversity of that best. So we emulate that on a smaller scale for cannabis, where when we do breeding projects, we start 50 to 100 seeds. Ideally, we'd like to start more, but for now, we're pretty confident that it's working with the results. And then we basically select down the 3 or sometimes even 4 best standout males from those 100 seeds, knowing the lines and knowing the direction that we want to go. Mm-hmm. You know, if we're looking for our next generation of our Rebel Sour, I know the Sour Diesel clone like the back of my hand. And I know the first, second, I know the different generations of in-crosses and back crosses and what plants you find. So I can help define the males that are going to have the sour traits, but the really aggressive, growing, vigorous ones. Totally. And basically the nose just has to be completely overwhelming. And so basically, so basically every strain has its own individual chamber. And in that chamber, what's great about our experimental process with our breeding is every time that we make a new selection for a back cross, in the same space we'll make an in-cross. So basically, we can test out multiple generations and make multiple generations of the same strain. So right now with our Rebel cookies, we can grow the F1 hybrid that made it, which is our original F1 Double OG Sour Scout. I can grow the F2 of the Double OG Sour Scout, the Rebel Cookies, which is the Rebel Scout back to cookies, and then I can grow an in-cross of that and the second back cross. So I can literally grow 5 or 6 different generations of that line
simultaneously,
and I get a really good understanding of everything that's in there. So it's an ongoing process that will never stop. But one day I'll get to that point where this is the best of the best of the best, and these are the clones that make it, and now I just continue making those. So that's where we're trying to get.
Nice. What's exciting you this year? What directions you want to run personally?
So Personally, our Double OG Sour is our most popular line, and it's like arm-sized buds, and it's super chunked. The resin production, everything about it is great, but I want to add more authentic OG nose. The phenotypes that I smoke out of it are actually more of the sour dominant side. And so our Double OG Sour Kush, which is basically the third generation in-cross of Double OG Sour back into an SFV, you get all the positive traits of the yield and the vigor and the amazing, stability that's in the Double OG Sour, but just one more generation of the SFV, and it really just shows I would say it's an improvement in terms of the terpenes in the nose. There's a little bit something, different in terms of the color. The bud's a little bit less lime green and more of that rich OG green. So the Double OG Sour Kush, and then the other one that we've been testing and working on is basically a back cross of our Double OG Sour into the Ghost OG. Two different cuts of Ghost OG, and we've only grown 2 indoor plants of it for R&D, and one of them was just crazy, and now we have a whole bunch of those right now that we're going to clone all the females out and do the next generation of seeds with.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because I saw, I want to say Nomad's Landing, they work on the Jadam Korean ag, and they had a stunning photo they posted of one of the Double OG Sours in that Korean system.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just stunning. That's the issue with a lot of the fuels, is that the construction, the thing is, there's only a couple guys that are working fuel directions correctly for outdoor growers, and everything else is sourced through indoor situations, and people don't really understand that when the plant starts to get up into weight, it changes really how the plant has to exist as a plant. And most of these plants that are coming from the indoor lines, once you oversize them, they just collapse and start to crush, and they snap off at the base, the branches are falling off of them. It's not that they're not fired in genetics, it's just that they weren't sourced correctly.
Sure.
And that was, I think, the difference that I see with a lot of the stuff you're working with, is that you get some of the giantest ass plants out of your stock, but damn, the quality doesn't diminish.
Sure, so that's about our selection process.
Yeah.
So last week I was starting on the selection process of our males. We have a whole bunch of different plants to go through. I made it through maybe 1/3 of the plants, and we'll still do another male selection. So I put them through all types of tests. I mean, I really get into the plant structure and making the comparisons. I take it out of the pot, I look at the roots, I see how vigorous it is, the leaf shape. I mean, even on the fatter bladed strains, I actually like thinner bladed leaves for more light penetration. But in terms of the branching, I like to just kind of, not gently, but not too hard, I just push down on the branches. And I don't care how good that male smells. If that branch breaks, I kill it, because I'm not gonna use something for breeding that isn't going to hold a lot of weight, because I like to grow big, freaking heavy buds. And then in terms of the nose, it's the same deal. Like, it has to check all the boxes. I'm growing enough plants that I should be able to find something that has the nose, that has the vigor, that has the sturdy structure and the strong branches to support the weight. And I should also be able to find something that has matching characteristics in the leaf shape and the structure of the plant and the smell towards maybe the female line that I'm going through. So it's really just about really taking that selection process serious. When me and my partner, whoever helps me do the selections, when we're done, it's like your nose is rubbed raw from the stems, and it's like you're just overwhelmed.
The histamines are wiped out.
And I mean literally rubbing it up until your nose is raw, because you've had thousands of male stems up against your nose. But so yeah, it's really just the selection, and having worked these lines for multiple generations, already knowing a lot of them, and just always trying to learn more.
You're in the new Highway too, right? The Highway magazine that's coming out, that's from John Vergados and Julie Trillo. It's connected to Skunk magazine. It's there's 3 versions. There's Skunk, there's California Highway, Canadian Highway, and Highway's cool. It's all about craft cannabis throughout the West Coast, and Dan is featured heavily in it, and there's some stunning photos of his farm. But it's a good article on some of your thoughts and some of your pieces. So check out the new Highway. I think it comes out this week.
Yeah. I mean, I read my first High Times magazine when I was a kid, probably 14 years old. And I was in a room full of 11 guys drinking Jack Daniels and 40s and smoking blunts, and I didn't care about any of that. I just read the High Times. It was my friend's mom's copy from the late 70s, and that changed my life that day. And so Skunk magazine and High Times magazine and cannabis culture, when a new article came out, you didn't see me for a couple days.
Yeah, I was a weed world head too.
So it's an honor to be a part of that, what John and Julie are doing, and to see, actually people giving me feedback that I'm just trying to, you take the books that we all learned from, the Jorge Cervantes books and the Ed Rosenthal and the Mel Frank and all those stuff, and there's so much information in there. That's the basics that all the growers need to know. But sometimes I wish that they would get more into the specific detail. How can they break down one process instead of saying, well, this is how you could do this. Well, how do you do it, and why
exactly.
do you do it that
way?
A
step by step and almost scientific method.
Yeah,
documented. Well, the thing is, I had this discussion with someone the other day. We were trying to talk about why everything's oral. And so I recorded the oral history of CBD for Shango Loss on the Shaping Fire podcast because I was in the room when this went down. So I said, let's just record it, because otherwise, if a few of us disappear, no one will know. And I was trying to explain why so much of it wasn't written down. And I caught a case back in like '02, and I caught this extension on the case because of my extensive spreadsheets that I was doing crop analysis on. And it changed from a normal charge into a criminal mastermind charge because of note keeping. But it was good note keeping. It was very, very good data that was used to help me analyze and understand the variables of production so I could understand better what we were doing at that time. It's just that we were a little ahead of the time curve.
Sure.
But if you had anything written down, you basically beaten with a stick in the courtroom. So all of us kept everything in the head, but now we have an ability to do this differently, and it's pretty fascinating to see. Man, I'm glad you came in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kev. It's an honor.
Awesome. We get any questions coming in?
We don't have any yet.
Okay, cool. I'm going to ask another one myself. When you're looking into the future for some of the stuff you're looking to, are there any lines you're just interested in, period, like directions?
For genetics?
Yeah, just in your own, places
so,
you're looking. Like, what do you miss?
Sure.
Like me, I'm chasing Cambodian stuff. I'm chasing Southeast Asian stuff.
Okay.
I'm chasing things that I used to like when I was young that I don't see anymore.
So I was actually talking a little bit about that today earlier. I've always been on a search for the authentic Durban Poison that smelled like anise, like black licorice. Yeah. And I was just having this conversation with someone about how a lot of the Durbans, I'll go to a dispensary and I'll buy every Durban clone or every Durban flower, and it always tastes like some bad Jack or some weird, It's
not the correct one. The same. Right. They're mixed. The old Durban was anise and had a different high.
And I only had that a few times in my life, in my late teenage years, early 20s, and it was like a long-lasting. I mean, I remember like 4 to 6 hour highs, feeling incredible. But most importantly, the flavor just lingered for like 20 minutes after you smoked it. But then, what I'm really searching for is an authentic, one-of-a-kind skunk and strawberry cough. I came up in the Northeast. Mm-hmm. The original strawberry cough that I used to get my hands on when I was younger, it was like, when you smoke it, the smell in the room was like an incredible tropical, perfume or incense. It was incredible. It's kind of like that piff, like an old New York haze or the black haze from Florida. And the deal is, it was so incredible that every time I would smoke it, I'd make the person leave the room to clear their palate, come back in, and the smell was just so incredible. Literally one of my favorite smells to this day. Anyway, I've had several cuts and seed lines of it, and one day I'd like to find that authentic strawberry cough that to this day is probably some of the best tasting cannabis that I've ever had.
Yeah, no, I remember you had a beautiful strawberry line. You had worked off of it when you got to Humboldt that just did beautiful outside. Mm-hmm. But I've never really got to experience the old. I was out of New England I was no longer in New England when that stuff was around.
Sure.
So I didn't get to check out some of the stuff that came out of where I'm from. But I got to taste the hybrids of it, but not the pure version of it. So I'd be down. But I used to have access to the Durban. I was a Durban dude, and I've been saying for a while. Just like I got a guy that brought me in I got a Super Silver from '02.
Oh, okay.
It just got brought in. So same thing. It's specific things that came from the past, and we're sourcing out a Durban from SoCal that was held.
Sure.
We got a question?
Zoe wants to know, what strains are you excited about this season?
We excited about
this season?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you're running some stuff. Like, what are you cracking? I know from your lines, I'm cracking your lemon Sugar Kush.
Okay.
I'm doing an OG Chem back cross too.
Yes.
I'm doing the other version, and I'm tapping into. I haven't cracked it yet, but those have been cracked.
So I grow too many strains, but I am really excited about our lemon Sugar Kush. It's a lemon Larry OG line that's a in cross and a back cross, and it's killer. 2 years ago, we did a lot of those, and they were amongst the best stuff that we did. So yeah, the Ghost OG into the Double OG Sour, I'm stoked on that. The lemon Sugar Kush. We've got a couple clones that I'm really excited to test out more. One of our Rebel Sours from last year is like kind of just this funky, skunky, like Sprite lime green, and it's just like it's almost too strong for me. We have a really nice 5G's purple back cross. I'm actually gonna find a time to take a break for a smoke after this, and it's kind of got like the 5G's is this crazy poly hybrid with a bunch of stuff, but this one has this really weird like tangy, funk from like the Kush part of it, but then it's got this nice fruity floral part of it too, and it's this is what I've been smoking the last few days. So I grow too many strains, and people ask me all the time what are my favorites, and I basically tell them I refuse to answer it, but I'll tell you about the ones that I like the most. So there's a lot of stuff. We have a really nice clone of our Golden Grams, which is similar to the original mom of it from 3 generations prior, which I'm excited to run more of this year.
And we got some gorgeous photos on the wall. We had Emerald Triangle Organics. They ran a bunch of stuff last year, and they had some professional photographers come in and shoot the crop.
Sure.
And then Matt from ETO is a friend of mine, so he gave me all these gorgeous pictures of it. But we got them on the wall at a shop.
Yeah,
and
those guys are great, man.
Stunning.
I mean, super cool, and they rocked out a bunch of our stuff and did a killer job. And we're hitting like 8 to 12 pound, plants in 200-gallon pots, which honestly beat my record for 200s because I had a lemon sugar Kush hit 9.5 in a 200-gallon pot, and that was my record for 200. But I think he broke it.
You got some Blue Dream hybrids though that you throw some crazy numbers on.
Yeah.
You're trying to do some. You're looking for the 2.0s and stuff.
This year we're trying to grow a 20-pound plant. The deal is, whatever. We don't need to get into Blue Dream, but the truth is, when grown right, it's a really great plant.
Oh yeah.
And for
people, I'll tell you, people hate it because it allows outdoor to compete with indoor because you have a vertical scope. It's good cannabis, so it wouldn't sell everywhere.
If you took me back to like 15, 20 years ago for me and gave me a Blue Dream clone, it would be the best thing I've ever seen in my life because it's so easy to grow.
And the high's good.
So what we did is when I started making Blue Dream hybrids, just messing around with it and testing out those hybrids, the one that had the OG Chem male into it, the males and the females, they all grew super Blue Dream dominant. Stretchy, that same smell with the stem rub, the thin bladed leaves, and crazy, crazy, crazy vigor. I took 2 different males that were pretty close to identical from that first hybrid, backed them into the Blue Dream, and have been working that into back cross lines. And what's really cool is, it's basically Blue Dream, but with increased resin production. The vigor is the same, if not improved upon, because it's from a seed from only a 2nd or 3rd generation, as opposed to some clone that came out of Santa Cruz, I don't know the history, 8, 10, 12, 15 years ago. But I had some friends last year I used to do some consulting with, and I gave them some recommendations on what I would do, and they were averaging 16 pounds on them. That was 800 gallons of soil. I put in a couple 1,000-gallon smart pots last year just to get them, it was a little late in the year. This year we're going to do it right and try to hit some 20-pounders if we can do it.
We got another question.
Someone wants to know, do you have another genetic terp rich for Washington climate, outdoor or light depth preferable?
Washington climate. Okay, so the
Washington meaning coastal or Washington eastern?
It just says Washington climate.
So terp-wise, the lemon sugar Kush was the highest terpene of anything we grew last year, and we had one flower that tested at 4.02% terpenes. So that's really great on the terps. Some of our other lines, like the crazy hybrids, like the 5Gs, the right ones have ridiculous terps and they're good with mold resistance, but the wrong ones, people might not be that stoked. It's kind of the strain that instead of running it for commercial production, you might want to do a selection before you dive into growing a whole ton of them. So Lemon Sugar Kush has really, really good terpenes. In the OG Chem Dog backcross lines, those are pretty good with the vigor and the mold resistance. I know there's 2 of them, and basically the OG Chem Dog Backcross 2 has an influence of sour diesel, and that would do great. But the 2.2, the other influence besides the OG Chem Dog is from our 5Gs Yellow, and that actually passes on the terps that I really liked about the 5Gs line. And so that's cool because you'll get these crazy, funky, cushy plants with a lot of fuel, and then the influence that you'll get from the 5Gs Yellow is going to come in this weird, tangy, intense, putrid but in a good way nose. So the terps are strong on that one. And then you get this occasional kind of purpley looking structure to the stem and the edges of the leaf, but it still has all that fuel cushiness. So the OG Chem Backcross 2.2 would be good for terps. Lemon Sugar Kush. Our Dalai Lama strain has some crazy terpenes, and
What's that up?
So Dalai Lama is basically our double OG Sour Diesel, which is a Sour Diesel clone crossed with double OG Sour Starfighter, and that's crossed into a male Satori. And Satori's from Mandala seeds out in Spain, which what I know about them, I think it's a husband and wife team that traveled around the world collecting landrace genetics and breeding it. And I had a plant back in 2007 that I grew, which like made someone have a panic attack and quit smoking weed. I had a UFO sighting. I had a UFO sighting on Friday the 13th after smoking that stuff, and I could never smoke it again. The Reverend Al Green smoked some of it that I grew on his tour bus, and he bugged out from it. And so it's just crazy trippy weed. I believe the genetics are from Nepal or India. And so crossed into our double OG sour diesel, you get some of that fuel, but these really intense, exotic, unique terps from the Satori. And it grows like buds that are the size of like 2 paper towel things stacked like this. There's some mold risk to it if the weather isn't great, but it's an interesting one. It's
nice, the Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama.
Beautiful.
People like the name of it. People are always asking, oh, that sounds cool because of the name, without even knowing what it is. But I personally don't smoke it a lot because the other thing about that Satori and the Dalai Lama is it messes with your eyes. It does something with your vision.
Gotcha.
It's some really, really psychedelic herb.
Oh, I'm going to try that. Yeah, you don't see a lot of that anymore. People don't like overly cerebral cannabis, but I like to play around with that.
Sure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Neat.
Another one.
Well, shoot.
She wants to know what makes a strain PM resistant.
So, I'm not a scientist. And, Kev actually may be better at answering this one than I would be. But what I would say is fresh genetics. I mean, usually growing from seed is just a lot of the clones that we grow commercially might be 20 years old. So you're growing an OG cut that came from Florida in the late 80s, early 90s, or a sour diesel that came from whatever and was spread to these different regions. They're 20 plus years old plants. And what's going to be easier to keep healthy? Like an 80-year-old human or a brand new human with a stronger immune system. So growing from seed, I think, is always going to be more resistant to those things. And then I guess it would be the selections and, testing them against heat stress and drought and conditions. But Kev may have a better answer for that than I would.
Well, you're right about the vigor of the plant is definitely connected to it because it allows a plant to have a resistance. But a lot of it too is that when we work with these things, these problems, you got to remember that almost all varieties you mess with nowadays was sifted from indoor workers who used toxic chemicals as preventatives. So really, we're not seeing a reality with our selection process. Only now we see a reality with selection process where we put plants outside. We don't use anything that's a toxic preventative. We use biology-driven metabolism so the plant functions on a normal level. And then we can go through populations and start to say, hey, there's tendencies here. These seem to be pretty solid. So it's a combination of all those things. It's trying to get the plant to balance out. You got to remember the things that catch PM are things that they're from high mountain deserts, and we're over here pumping them with food they would never have received naturally. We're putting them in situations that they never would have been in environmentally. And then we wonder why. And so even when I go through good lines that are solid, I still see ones that have the greatest chance of failure. And then you see the ones that have the greatest chance of success. But when you got guys that are doing good selection process on the breed end, see, that's the whole point where the breeder comes in, is that it's not just throwing pollen on a plant. It's that they've really taken a good look and found males that seem to throw traits that are reliable so they can predict. And they are using female cultivars that are having resistance and quality in the production. And so the difference that, like, from my perspective, is that you're a real farmer, farming your products, growing these products, and in the selection process, you're saying, hey, these are the lines we can work with and have success. And so when someone says, hey, what makes something this, it starts here, and then it goes to you as the farmer with your biological process, and then you start to figure out what works in your location. And when all those things come together, you have a success. But it always starts with the guy putting the line out first. And so for us that are in modern outdoor, modern greenhouse, modern depth, we're having to go through all these lines and re-sift because almost everything you touch nowadays was really done inside because cannabis was driven indoor for 20 years because there was helicopters flying outside. So you didn't have the ability to do the sifts. And so everything was in this buffered environment where you don't have a 3D consideration. You're not looking at space, you're looking at its flat grid. So it changes radically the selection process. And the amount of toxic shit right now in California, 12 pounds out of 100 are sellable due to toxic. And so for him to work on varieties that allow you to get a product to the market without any toxins, it begins there.
Sure. And last 2 points about powdered mildew is I remember reading a research paper that was out of a university or college in Mendocino, and they were saying just due to global warming or for whatever reason, the spore count of powdered mildew reaches an all-time high every single year. So there's more powdered mildew naturally in the environment every year than there was before. Now the last point that I'll make about powdered mildew is that if your plants are strong enough plants, whether it's a 25-year-old clone or a brand new seedling, plants can be healthy enough through healthy soil biology that they can have such a strong immune system that powdered mildew can't live on them. I think if the Brix level is above whatever, number or whatever, it can't survive, and basically, everybody has had problems with it in the past. If you really work hard and do your research and you're diligent on your PMI and you use responsible products, or even through just really creating an incredibly diverse, healthy soil biology, you can avoid powdered mildew altogether, which is really freaking hard to do.
If you're looking at it, like if you look at other industries that are doing it, meaning other agricultural industries that are organic, so like bean crop, they're using microbiology that helps uptake silica, and when they drive the silicate levels in the plant, it creates a tougher epidermal situation. So there's a guy locally, what's his name? Luke Bessemer off the T Lab. He's over in I think Eureka. So Luke Bessemer, he sources out these specific microbes, and we buy them, and we bubble them up in our tanks, and we pour them through all the plants. And it just allows the plant to be able to have a much more efficient silica uptake. And lo and behold, you're just having a resistance that's much better. You just have to really be looking at it from a very forward-thinking perspective. And sometimes there's just cultivars that just straight don't want to exist. I mean, they're really, really nice, but when they were selected by people who were covering them in fungicides. And so that one was never meant to be selected. There was sisters that were next to it that should have been grabbed, and that's where we messed up, is that when we were doing this back in the day, the money drove the process so hard, and that we didn't have the ability to hold plants in quantities because the charges rose so dramatically that you ended up having to shift your libraries into smaller populations of movable stock. And as we all sit here now, we're trying to figure out what we're working with. That's where phylos technology, that's where communication between growers, breeders, plant providers, and all of a sudden we can start to say, hey, this is a population of plants we should use for production purposes, and these are populations of plants we use for research purposes. And it starts to let farmers just say, listen, these things have been proven, they don't have issues. Like when Bodie, we hear him chopping it up, I sifted his 88G13 line with the 91 OG bred into it. And I went through something to find something that had a good ball shape that was pretty consistent, more on an earthy tone.
Right.
And I went through a big population and pulled one out that had no issues. And this way now we can release it as a sample of his work.
Awesome.
And it works. So I think we're ready to call it a close. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kev.
Anything to close with?
Yeah, I mean, I really like talking about cannabis. I really love it a lot. So this is, a dream to be in the Emerald Triangle and, the epicenter of where all this culture really originated, and get to work with guys like Kev and share knowledge and learn knowledge. If anybody ever wants to ask me questions about cannabis, email me at dan@rebelgrown.com, and I'll take the time to answer questions because I like to talk about weed. And thank you so much for doing this for the community, and I'm grateful to be here.
Say thanks to the Instagram people too.
Hey.
Watching you.
Oh, what's up? Thank you
Thank
for
you.
people on Instagram too.
Thank you. And I want to thank Shango Loss and Shaping Fire for sponsoring this. It's just been a fantastic time. Thank you so much for listening and enjoying.